In this video, I'm going to give you everything that you need to know regarding resistance bands, training away from home, so that you are completely confident that you're going to get the most out of your sessions. You know how to deliver it, you know the common mistakes, all of the good stuff, okay, around resistance bands. And look, I'm currently working with, and I have worked with a lot of guys in the past who have access to the gym when they're at home, and they're regularly away traveling with work, and so they need to find a way of continuing to train, continuing to stimulate the muscles so that they can continue to progress, because ultimately they've lived a life as a result of their work travel where they stop start all the time, and they haven't been able to build the body that they want. All right. And my promise to you is that you'll develop an understanding. You know, by the end of this video, you'll have an understanding of how best to use them, what things to avoid, what things to be cautious of, and what things to focus your attention on around this subject. All right. And the plan is to go through the principles of using them, common mistakes, how to set it up properly, and things to bear in mind, and actually an example session we'll go into at the end, and much more. All right, so let's go dive into it. The first thing that I want to focus on is we have to leave our ego at home. Right, leave your ego at home. A lot of guys will think bands won't do anything. It's not hard enough. There's no point. All right, but if the goal is to build that physique that you want, if the goal is to change your life, change how you feel, how you show up, and build a physique that you're proud of, ultimately, you need to continue that training routine. And when our gym access is here, there, and everywhere as a result of our work travel, then we have to come up with another option. So leave your ego at home, put it in the bin, in fact, recycle it actually, and we need to do what we need to do, because bands up, when used effectively, when used properly, are a really, really effective tool. Okay, so in terms of how bands will actually build the muscle that we want, that we're after, ultimately, all our muscles know is the tension we put them under through training close to failure or at failure, and they just know the volume that they get per week. Right? The total volume that we're aiming for. And the bands can provide all of this, all right? It looks slightly different, but it can absolutely provide what our muscles need. And they're not going to know, our muscles aren't going to know where it's coming from. Ultimately, we just need to provide it with that tension, okay? And sufficient tension over the course of a week, consistently, week after week. And the problem isn't the bands, right? The problem isn't the bands themselves. Although part of it is our kind of mentality towards the bands, it's also how we physically use them, right? And using them properly, tweaking things, and making it align with what we're currently doing in the gym is the goal here, okay? So understanding the band resistance is really, really key, yeah? The resistance in a band increases as it stretches. All right, so at the start of the movement, potentially there's going to be very little resistance, if any, as a result of the band. This is when it might be slack. And at the peak of the movement, the contraction, the resistance from the band is going to be at the most, at the highest. Yeah. And often exercises, they feel hardest at the end of the movement, right? But we need to make sure, we need to adjust our positioning so that there is tension on the band throughout the entire movement. Like, this is essential, because if at any point the band is going slack, if at any point the resistance goes, that tension on our muscles drops dramatically, and we're leaving gains on the table. We're leaving progress on the table. So we have to provide consistent tension throughout the muscle. It's like when we're in the gym, if we're lifting kind of doing a bench press, and we re-racked and we let go of the weight in between each rep, right? It's just not as effective as it could be. So some movements are obviously better suited than others for this, but we have to test the movements. So when we're warming up, and this is the the part of it, right? These first few sessions we do, the first few times we need to do this, it isn't going to look perfect. But like anything, we have to persist. We have to keep working. It's like a skill that will improve. And then the more we improve, the more we're going to benefit from it. So we have to practice it, understand which movements are more suited and which movements we have to adjust in a certain way to be able to see the consistent tension that we want. That's why having somebody look at your form, look at your videos, assess it for you, give you another kind of set of eyes is really, really useful, right? Quick note, in terms of the bands that we want, we want a set with a range of thicknesses. We want the ability to progress. We don't want to have one band, and it makes it very difficult to progressively overload, which is ultimately what we're aiming for when it comes to the gym, right? To continually see muscle growth. So we want that range of different thicknesses. We want the ability to change the bands we use. Because ultimately different movements are going to be easier, or the thin band, the least resistance band, might actually be sufficient and it might provide you with enough, so every movement's going to be unique, so we want to get the right bands. All right, why and the most important thing is being able to progress. All right, and the thicker bands, the most ones with the most resistance, may not always be the best ones for certain movements, because ultimately if they're thicker, it takes way more for them to stretch, and it will be very difficult for it to stretch enough so that, again, we have tension throughout the entire movement. So it requires a bit of play, it requires a bit of getting used to and testing things out. All right, and a big thing to remember to get when you pick up your resistance band, you grab a set on Amazon, is to get maybe the handles that you can kind of clip on to the bands, but really importantly is to get the door fixture. So the thing you can put it in the door, you can shut the door and it kind of locks in, then you can wrap the band around it, because we're not always going to have a bedpost, or we're not always going to have a pillar or something we can hook the band around. And we're always going to have access to a doorway, right? So this is going to be really useful. And obviously you can then put it in the bottom, the top for a pull down movement. You can put it up the side, so you can kind of select any height of the fixed point that you want. In terms of setting up the band before you start, right? So most people start, as I said, with some slack in the band, which is not what we want. We want tension from the first rep. That is a must, and throughout the whole reps. Okay, and it will be the difference between a good set and a bad set in terms of the setup. Okay, that setup will dictate how good of quality that set is, and we want that tension at the end of every movement throughout. Okay, the real goal, and this is an absolute must when it comes to resistance bands, and it's the biggest mistake that a lot of guys that I've spoken to make, right, is using a light band and doing a million reps and not actually trying to replicate what they're doing in the gym with the bands, okay? Because then we almost feel like we're going from one extreme to another, and it's very easy to go through that process and just go through the motions and not kind of make the most of the bands, not really challenge yourself, and you're just doing it for the sake of it. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to make the reps as hard as we can. We want to try and replicate the rep ranges that we're doing in the gym. Yeah, we want to make it more difficult if we need to replicate the rep ranges that we're already doing, because we're replicating similar movements. Ultimately, if we're doing bench press, we want to do a press up, or we want to do a banded chest press or a banded fly. Like, we want to do similar movements, but just provide as much resistance as we can for those movements when we're not in the gym and don't have access to the gym. But rest assured that hypertrophy, muscle hypertrophy, so an increase in size, muscle size, it will happen between 5 and 30 reps if we're pushing close to or to failure. Okay, so if we can't identically get the rep ranges in the same spot, it's not the end of the world. However, just for long-term progress, for feeling like you're consistently working towards something with a similar structure, if we can replicate those rep ranges, then it kind of keeps us on that clear path of progression. And when we do go back to the gym, we can kind of aim for the progress and forward steps like we have. We're not going from doing 6 reps and that being our max one week when we're in the gym, and then doing 20 reps and then going back to 6 and trying to get to 7. And if we can make the press ups or the movement we're doing hard so that actually we're still maxing out and hitting failure around 6 or 7 reps, then that it just continues that routine, right? And I want you to think about this. Like, if we are doing bench press to 6 to 10 reps in the gym, we want to make sure that our reps, when we're using the bands, fall within that same range, and then it just feels less disrupted. The routine, the structure of training, as I said, it feels less disrupted. And most sets should finish within kind of 0 reps to 3 reps to failure, all right? Every set we should be pushing as hard as we can, in my opinion. And with the bands, if we're getting to 20 reps and we've still got kind of 10, 20 in the locker, then we're not working hard enough, okay? And ultimately, if you're not going to work hard, you're going to go through the motions, you aren't going to get the results you want. So you can't be frustrated and angry when you aren't seeing the progress. And we still want to be able to then, like if we're going to the gym, we do a certain number of reps, a certain amount of weight, and we then go away, we go through the motions, we do a crappy resistance band session, we go back the next week, we're going to struggle. Like, we want that week we're away, those sessions we do in the hotel room if we need to, wherever we do them when we're away, we want that to provide enough stimulus so that we can continue to progress next time we're in the gym. Like, every kind of session is a building block, and we want the building blocks to be just equal size. We want to be giving ourselves every chance of making those strides forward as a result of every session, right? If we go through the motions, we're not going to be doing that. If we don't push ourselves, make these movements harder, we're not going to be doing that. So we have to make sure the movements are down, right? We have to make sure we're confident with the movements. And I often see, movements being done with a lack of control, maybe using a thicker band when, it's not needed or it's not used properly, and the tension on the band is only through like a quarter of the movement, and then it goes slack. And so it needs to be the same as if we were in the gym, and that would replicate, when we're using the bands incorrectly, it replicates being in the gym and performing a movement with terrible form, ego lifting, doing a half of the range of motion, but doing it with twice as much weight as you should be. It doesn't, it's not going to help you progress, and it's going to increase the chance of you getting injured. Ultimately, you're going to be putting in this effort over a period of time, and you'll get down the line and you'll think, why do I not look how I want to? And nobody should be doing that. That's painful for me to watch somebody not get as much out of make as much progress for the effort that they're putting in, So we have to control and the contraction. That is key. We have to control the movement through the range of motion and really feel that contraction, work hard, and that's how we get the most from the sets, okay? And just like in the gym, if we're doing the movements properly, we're not gonna see the benefit. We're gonna see a very limited benefit, and it's gonna feel like a waste of time, and you will give up because you haven't seen the progress that you want. You feel like things aren't working, and then you will never get to where you actually want to be because you're like, this isn't working. I've tried, doesn't work, okay? And then we give up. And so going through the full range of motion in a controlled manner is very, very important. But remember, if we haven't used bands before, just like anything else, we can't expect to be good at something. It's different, fundamentally different. There's kind of different angles, or we've been pulled in different ways when we use bands that we haven't been before in the gym. And so it's a skill that we have to improve. In terms of anchoring the bands, we want to make sure we can either do it on bedposts, on heavy furniture, things that aren't going to move. Doorways are fantastic if you have that attachment for the band. But we want to be wary also of any damage to the bands. You know, if it starts to crack, if the rubber starts to kind of tear a little bit, then just be careful and replace it sooner rather than later. You'll thank yourself. In terms of progressively overloading with the bands, okay, obviously to build muscle, to see strength progress, we want to progressively overload as often as we can, okay, but we can't rush it. All right, because if we jump to a band that's much thicker, the thicker bands, it's going to change how that movement looks, right? Because it can stretch very differently, obviously. And the movement and the control can very easily go a bit to shit. Yeah. So sometimes we need to be sensible. Sometimes we don't just automatically go for and reach for that thicker band. We maybe continue to use the same band, and we make sure we're performing through the full range of motion. You know, that can be a way of making things harder. Ultimately, we want to put that muscle through its full range of motion so it's developing efficiently. And sometimes other changes are going to work better instead of kind of reaching for that thicker band. Things like just moving further away from that anchor point, you know, adding reps, adding an additional set. You know, if we feel like the movement we're doing, if we used a thicker band, it's not gonna work quite as well. So we can add some volume instead of increasing the difficulty of that specific movement. That's also a way to do it. You know, slowing down that movement, pausing, or reducing the rest period between the sets. Different things are, different movements will suit different ways of progressing. So don't automatically, what I'm trying to say is don't automatically reach for that thicker band. That's potentially a way to progress, but we have to take into account the movement we're doing, have to take into account how things may be changed by using a thicker band, whether there's a better way to progress it. Yeah, and often there is, but again, trial and error, bouncing it off somebody with some ideas is the best way to go forward. Yeah. And ultimately, we don't need bands for every movement. Like body weight movements, quite often for a lot of people, are going to be sufficient to, provide us with enough difficulty or resistance to kind of see progress and get close to failure. You know, press ups. I can make a set of press ups. I can make it difficult to the point where I'm not using any band or additional weight, but after 10 reps, I can't do any more, and I feel like I'm a fairly well-trained guy. So anyone less trained, absolutely. Like, there are movements where you don't need the addition of bands. We don't want to overcomplicate it, remember. So body weight can be great, and it can be enough. And we just want a gel, and we want a combination, and ultimately we want to look at the movements we're doing in the gym, try and replicate them as best we can, again, so that routine is as similar as it can be. So that structure doesn't change consistently, because that is where we give up. That's where we stop. That's where we make an excuse. Don't turn up one week, and ultimately open the door to kind of spiraling and not showing up consistently, which is what we need to do if you want to progress. Some common mistakes to be aware of. Using bands that are too light, like going through the motions, doing 30 reps and still being able to keep going. Like, we need to draw a line. We need to be aware. Sometimes it's very easy just to feel like, oh, this is amazing. I can do loads of reps. This is going to be really beneficial. But if it's not pushing us, if we're not training hard enough, we're not going to be seeing that progress, and we're wasting our time to a degree, you know. We don't have a progression plan. We don't record anything. We don't have any data, so we know kind of how we did things last week. When we're in the gym, it's a number. We can, we know what the weight and the reps we did last week. With bands, it's slightly different, so we may need to make a note, one sentence, describe the position we did, how we set it up. And it might be a bit of a faff, but remember, you only do it once, and then every week you can just go in and adjust it ever so slightly if you've made it harder in some way. And you just know that you refer back to that each time. And look, ultimately, you're not going to be doing this all the time if you're somebody who gyms when they have the opportunity to. So it's something to have there, because it might be 3 weeks since your last band session, and you're absolutely not going to know how exactly you set things up last time. And so we should be looking to make a note of things. A big one is rushing the reps. When we're doing a session in a hotel room, it's very easy to think, I just need to get this done. I've got other stuff I can be doing. I've got clients to go and meet, blah, blah, blah. We have to, think about this time as valuable to our progress as the gym session would be if we were at home, right? Or if we had access to a full gym. We can't rush it. We have to feel the contraction and put in just as much effort. Another big one is constantly changing the movements, not doing similar sessions, not kind of sticking with the same plan for a significant period of time, so that we can actually work on perfecting those movements and see progress with those movements. In the gym, if you're changing your gym plan more regularly than 6 to 8 weeks, then you're not sticking at it long enough, because you're not giving yourself the opportunity to perfect movements and progress with them. Ultimately, in theory, we can keep doing the same plan week after week after week, 12, 14, 16 weeks, if we're still progressing. If it's a case of, I'm bored of this now, I'm not going to continue to show up and do this because I'm so bored of these movements, then there's an argument to replace it, to tweak things. But ultimately, if we can stick at something for a long period of time and we're still progressing forward, plateau will happen at some point, but if we're still progressing, then that's fine, it's working. And also thinking that you need a gym, thinking that you need big machines or big pieces of equipment. So if there's no gym, what's the point in doing this at all? That is the wrong mindset to have. We need to put that mindset in the bin ASAP. Again, like the first point I made, put that ego aside. There is plenty of progress to be made, because ultimately your situation, your travel is what it is, and we have to make the most of it if you are serious about changing your physique and making all this progress. If you're not, all good, that's fine. But if you're here watching this, I'm guessing that you are serious about this. And so an example workout of a time-efficient workout you could do on a work trip to get the most out of it, full body. It might be 4 sets, and we'll do it in supersets to be more time efficient. Push-ups and band squats, all right? We're not doing 2 muscle groups that are going to be both working during both movements. So by doing a superset, that second movement isn't going to be affected because we're using a different muscle group, okay? The only reason it could be kind of slightly affected is if we have, cardiovascular fatigue, but you can have a short break in between. But to be more time efficient, your likelihood is, if you're on a work trip, you're busy, you've got things going on, evening plans, this kind of stuff. So it might be push-ups and band squats, 4 sets, 10 to 20 reps, right? The next kind of superset might be banded shoulder press, and you can do this standing, seated. There's a number of different ways to set up this movement. And so you have to find what works best for you, but also with the bands that you have, it might play a part. I'll do 3 sets of that, 8 to 15 reps. Ultimately, we want to be coming close to failure or getting to failure within these rep ranges. And it is very normal for the reps that we can perform set after set of a given movement to drop. Like if we are really pushing ourselves to the max, we will see a drop in reps. The first set you might be able to do 13 reps. Then the second, it's totally normal if you can only do 10 or 11 reps. Okay, fatigue will play a part. And then a third kind of superset would be 3 sets, 10 to 15 reps of banded tricep pushdowns. A great one. If you've got that fixture for the door, you can put that band nice and high, do the banded pushdowns, and a banded behind the back bicep curl. Again, fix it, the band nice and low at the floor, your elbow comes behind you, and you perform that banded bicep curl. All right, so that's covering most body parts. It's going to give you a good session. You're going to feel like you've worked out, but it isn't going to take too long. All right, and I would always favor good quality sets and more sets of less movements because it's always going to be more time efficient, right? Doing 4 sets of 3 kind of supersets instead of doing 2 or 3 sets of a load of different movements to try and hit every muscle in every session. It's going to take ages. All right, and the most important thing to remember, and I'll finish up here, I'll wrap up now. The most important thing to remember with your bands is the goal when we are traveling isn't to find the perfect workout, isn't to plan everything around having the best gym that you could possibly do. It's just to continue to send the signal to your body, to your muscles, that we need to work, we need to grow, and we need to progress, okay? You've worked hard to build this kind of routine, to build this lifestyle. You enjoy what you do. You're probably reaping the rewards. You're doing well for yourself. You're providing for your family. We don't want that to affect our physical health. So we need to find a way of continuing to maintain this positive routine and getting the most out of it. All right. And we're not trying to create that perfect environment. We're just doing the best we can any given week to continue to work hard and ultimately build that body you're proud of. And that sets you up for the best quality of life for the rest of your life, to keep you as active as possible and kind of in the best mental space as well. So stop a work trip turning into 2 weeks of doing nothing. All right, that's why we include resistance band sessions. It's going to stop any work trip turning into just, completely fall off, and then we'll get back on track when we're home. Yeah, and this can be the difference. Continuing to do something, even if it looks different, even if it doesn't look perfect, continuing to do something will be the difference between you making progress and just constantly starting over. All right, so if you are serious about making this progress, if you're serious about building the body that you want, you don't know where to start. You don't know where to start with a gym plan and how to change things, how to do the movements. You're not confident. If you want some guidance on how to do that, then DM me over on Instagram, bands or resistance bands, or just message me over on Instagram at Jacob Connock Coach, and let me know kind of where you're at, and we can discuss what your work travel looks like and how we could put a plan in place to make sure that you are seeing the progress that you want. All right. Hopefully that was useful. Hopefully you found it helpful, and we will leave it there, and I will catch you in the next one.